Hello everyone, what's going on? I'm Gav the Master974 back again today, and welcome to another Valve source code tutorial video. And what I'm going to be doing today is showcasing how you can add the Gamepad UI feature, which is what you would see if you play Half-Life 2 or Portal on the Steam Deck, and how you can go about adding this into your mod. Now, this wasn't a viewer suggestion, I just came across a guide on the Valve Developer Wiki recently, and I thought I just wanted to do a video about it because I thought you might find this interesting. And I do need to give a thank you to Joshua Ashton, who is the original creator of this feature, and to Maddie for making it work with Source 2013. Just a bit of a clarification, this is for Source 2013 single player. This isn't going to work for Source 2013 multiplayer, and maybe I'll get to why, but you could probably also see why as I go through the video. So what you want to do first and foremost is go to the GitHub page that's going to be linked in the description of the video, and you want to download the zip of this repository and then extract the contents to wherever you want to on your device. And then you want to copy the contents of the game mod HL2 folder into your mod folder. So essentially in your main mod folder where you have the bin folder for the client and server DLLs, the gameinfo.txt, maps, and all that stuff, you would have a folder called Gamepad UI. And then additionally, you want to copy the contents of the SRC game folder into your mod's SRC game folder. You're going to get a message saying if you want to replace one of the files that exists, you want to select yes. So in your mod's SRC game folder with the client, server, and shared folders, there should be a new folder called Gamepad UI. Then you want to go to your mod's SRC VPC scripts folder. Can't say I've ever been in here before, but you want to open up the groups.vgc file and projects.vgc file. So in groups.vgc, you want to add to the $ group and then inside of speech marks Gamepad UI somewhere. And then in the $ group, everything inside the speech marks, you also want to add Gamepad UI in there. And then inside of projects.vgc, you want to add this somewhere. So it's $project, and then in speech marks, Gamepad UI, and then inside the curly brackets, and then in speech marks, game/Gamepad UI /Gamepad UI _HL2.vpc, and then in square brackets after it, $HL2. And then you can also do Gamepad UI episodic.vpc, as you'll probably see in the video, and then in square brackets after that, $episodic. And if you want to be really adventurous, you can add Gamepad UI portal.vpc, and then put inside the square brackets after the speech marks $portal. But that's not going to work in normal Source 2013 conditions because you don't have access to the Portal source code, but it's just there in case you want to use it if you get the Portal code from source code leaks, for example. But when you're done with this step, you want to go to your SRC game client folder and open up clientbase.vpc. And near the top of this file, there's going to be a section called preprocessor definitions. And you want to add Gamepad UI somewhere in these preprocessor definitions. This will make it so the Gamepad UI macro, which is used in the cdll client int.cpp file, actually usable. This actually enables the Gamepad UI stuff to work. So once all of these changes have been made, you can run the create game projects and or the create all projects batch files, and then that would create the game's everything solution, but then incorporate the Gamepad UI code into those solutions. So if you open up the game solution, you can see Gamepad UI for HL2 and Gamepad UI for episodic. Now, one of the things that you need to do to make the Gamepad UI stuff work is to find the file panel.h. And you got the correct file because it's at src public vgui controls and panel.h. And in the file, you want to find the function post message to all siblings of type. And it should be contained in a hashtag if0 statement, which means it's never actually used. But you want to change the 0 to a 1, that way the function ends up getting used. because this is needed for the Gamepad UI stuff to work, and despite what the developer comment says, uncommenting this function doesn't cause any issues. So when you've done this, you can build the solution, it should compile without any issues, and if you want to actually go ahead and test the Gamepad UI feature stuff now, you need to add -Gamepad UI to the launch arguments. So in Visual Studio, you would simply right click on the main project, the one that looks bolder, it should be one of the client or server projects. Then go to the properties, then go to the debugging section, and in the command arguments section, before -game, you want to add -Gamepad UI. And if you're going to test the mod through Steam, then you want to right click on the mod in Steam, go to properties, and then the launch options should be visible immediately. And then you just want to add -Gamepad UI there. And then when you load into the mod, you should see that the Gamepad UI is working. Now, one of the things that you might notice immediately when trying to use this feature is that the name of your mod appears twice. Now, this is actually because of the game UI, not the Gamepad UI that we've been dealing with, but the actual game UI that's responsible for drawing the menu under normal circumstances, not getting the memo that the Gamepad UI command line was added, so it causes at least the logo for the game to be drawn twice, which is not good because unfortunately the game UI code is inaccessible, and so we can't change it to make it so that the game UI menu doesn't draw when the Gamepad UI sort of command argument is passed through. So that kind of sucks. The only thing that I found that was kind of a resolution to the issue was to actually change the resolution of the game. It seems as if when you do that, the game UI menu disappears, only leaving the Gamepad UI menu to work essentially as normal. But yeah, I don't know of any other way that this could be resolved, and you could think about being clever and use an image or a logo to sort of hide the text and use game logo 1 in your gameinfo.txt file, but then that would just cause the image or logo or whatever to be drawn instead of text, and that still causes issues. But there is a workaround, I feel at least. However, you must always use the Gamepad UI and never use the normal game UI, but that's something I'll get to in a little bit. So there's some interesting things we can do with this Gamepad UI stuff. So let's start from the top down. So you can go into new game and you can see that there's different chapter images. So if you want to replace the chapter images, you want to import the image that represents your chapter into VTF Edit. Now the image needs to be 1024 by 512 in size, or double that, 2048 by 1024 in size. And then when that image is imported into VTF Edit, you want to make sure the options sRGB, no MIP map, and no level of detail are selected. And then you want to save the VTF as chapter whatever.vtf, where, you know, it could be chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and so on. And if you want to add more chapters, or if for whatever reason you want to overwrite the .vmt files that already exist, then in the .vmt file for chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, whatever, you need to have inside of speech marks unlit generic, that's the shader that's going to be used, and then inside the curly brackets, then $ base texture in speech marks, and then after that another set of speech marks containing Gamepad UI / chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, whatever, then $ vertex color in speech marks with a 1 after it, $ vertex alpha in speech marks with a 1 after it, $ ignore z with a 1 after it, and $ no underscore Fulbright, but that has 1 inside the speech marks after it. You'll see exactly what I mean in the video, just follow that format, it should work fine. Now the next thing I'm going to go over is adding developer commentary. Now this is something that you actually need to enable through the Gamepad UI code. So to do this, you need to go to the file gamepadui_newgame.cpp, and near the top of the file, you'll see a function called GameHasCommentary. Now this function checks the game folder and it compares it to the sort of standard source game folders, HL2, Episodic, Portal, Lost Coast, and all that good stuff. But you can simply comment out or delete the code in this function and replace it with return true. and that will just always enable the developer commentary option in the new game menu. Now, one of the things you'll notice is if you go into this option, it'll say that it's going to have commentary from Valve. But you can replace that by copying over the Game UI English or Game UI language.txt file from your Source 2013 single player's HL2 resource folder, pasting that file into your mods resource folder, and then you need to find the Game UI commentary console explanation parameter and change it. And then when you go into the mod, you can see that the changes have been accommodated. Next up on the list is going to be the options menu. Now, one of the things you'll see immediately is when you go to the difficulty options, there's images that represent the easy, medium, and hard difficulties. Now, you can change these images if you want to. All I would say for now is that they need to adhere to a specific format, and I'm not really going to go into it because the textures themselves don't seem to follow any sort of consistent pattern, but there is one thing in common with all of them, and that's something that I'm going to get to with this workaround that I'll get to in a little bit. But all of the options are the same as what you would get in the sort of standard Game UI options menu, including stuff like custom options for custom keybinds, like you can add the iron sights, for example, and that shows up in both the Game UI and Gamepad UI menus, so nothing to worry about there. But one of the things that I did notice is that the back button on most of the options doesn't actually cycle through the choices in a backwards direction. They only cycle going forwards. So if you press the back button, the option cycles forward. If you press the forward button, the options cycle forwards. Now, I don't know how this could be fixed, but considering under normal circumstances, you would only be accessing this Gamepad UI feature through the Steam Deck or by having a controller connected, and these options would use the directional buttons to adjust the options. And I tested this in Half-Life 2, clicking on the options doesn't actually do anything, so you do need to use the directional buttons to change the options. So there's probably going to need to be something that says that if you click the options it doesn't do anything, but as I said, I don't know what to do about that. And the last thing to consider with the options menu is the achievements button. Now, if you don't plan on adding achievements, even though I've done a video talking about adding achievements, then you can pretty much remove this option. So if you want to remove it, you need to go to your mod's Gamepad UI main menu.res file, and then you just need to open it up, find the achievements section, and just remove it. And then achievements will no longer show up. Now, there's actually something I did want to point out about the achievements as a little bit of a minor follow-up to the achievements video that I did, which is that if you do go down the road of adding custom achievements, then the icons will show up, but the text for the achievements won't. Now, the funny thing is, I actually figured out why this is happening, but I'm going to save it for a follow-up video. Hopefully it's not going to be released too long after this video, but stay tuned for that. Alright, so let's get to this workaround at last. So the first thing you want to do is go to your cdll client int.cpp file, which is going to be on the client. And near the top of this function, or at least somewhere in this file, there's going to be a function called isSteamDeck. Now, normally what this function does is it checks to see if the -gamepad UI parameter has been passed through, or if the environment is the Steam Deck. And then if either of those are true, then it determines that you're on the Steam Deck, otherwise the Gamepad UI won't be used. However, as I said earlier, the workaround needs to always have the Gamepad UI enabled. So what you can do is pretty much comment out or delete the contents of this function and simply add return true. That way the Gamepad UI will always be used. Then you want to go to your mod's Gamepad UI scheme main menu.res file and open it up. And near the top of the file, you want to add inside the speech marks logo.image, and then in another set of speech marks after that, Gamepad UI /logo name, where logo name is the name of the material that contains the logo for your mod. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be calling it ETB_logo. This material would need to be in your mod's materials Gamepad UI folder, and the VTF file needs to be 1024 by 512 in size, and the image in VTF Edit would also need to have the flags sRGB, no MIP map, and no level of detail selected. But when I said earlier about the easy, medium and hard difficulty images needing to adhere to a special format, let's get into what this special format actually is. So when I said I'm using the material ETB logo, that is because I'm going to be commandeering the logo from the game Escape the Backrooms. It's pretty good and scary, but let's just get straight into the process. So I'm going to be using a software called GIMP for this. So what you want to do is make sure that your image looks okay when the height of the image is 512 in size. Then when you're happy with the way it looks, you need to scale the image to a 2:1 aspect ratio. So in other words, it needs to be fit inside of a size of 1024 by 512. Now it would look squashed and compressed, but that is actually required for the logo to look correct when the main menu actually loads up. Then you want to go to a layer mask. So you need to right click on the layer and then add a layer mask. And then you want to initialize it with the layer's alpha channel. If the image doesn't have an alpha channel, then you might need to add one prior to doing that step. And then what you want to do is kind of copy paste the layer's contents into the layer mask. And again, I can just show some footage where I actually succeeded with this with a completely different logo. But essentially you should see the RGB channels and then the alpha channel. If you disable the RGB channels, then all you should be left with is the outline of the logo. And then if that gets disabled, then you kind of see the logo. Again, it doesn't make sense, but you see in the video, that's kind of what you need to do. The alpha channel, when that's enabled, has to have the outline of the logo. So that's kind of what you need to do for these images in the Gamepad UI, and that's pretty much all there really is to it. So at this point, once you're happy with the way this looks, you can export the image, and then with the image exported, you can then import it into VTF Edit. And as stated earlier, the flags sRGB, no MIP map, and no level of detail need to be selected. And then you need to save the VTF to your mods materials Gamepad UI folder as logoname.vtf. So in my case, it's etb_logo. Okay, just a quick little addendum here. I was consulting my audio commentary and also the video footage, and I didn't even cover the .vmt file for the logo that you should be using for the Gamepad UI. So just allow me to zoom this in, and you can see exactly what you need to do. Much like with some of the things I talked about earlier in the video, you use the unlit generic shader, then base texture is Gamepad UI, logo name, then vertex color 1, vertex alpha 1, translucent 1, ignore Z1 and no full bright, and then 1 inside the speech marks. So I thought I'd just clarify that here because I didn't mention it earlier. And then when you go into the mod, you should see that the logo should be displayed without any issues. But this is going to include one caveat, which is that in the gameinfo.txt file under the title parameter, it needs to have only a single space character. If you have nothing inside of the title section, like it's just a set of speech marks with nothing in them, then it doesn't actually cause any text or any logo to be drawn. But with a single space character, it doesn't actually cause any text to be drawn. And then in the Gamepad UI, it's going to draw the logo. So then we're forcing the mod to run with the Gamepad UI. So the logo is always going to be drawn. And because there's no text in the title section, you don't get the text from the game UI drawing, which then means you only get one main menu logo being displayed, which is exactly what we want to avoid any issues with the name of the logo drawing twice. Alright, so I'm going to move on to some final notes and then round off the video. So one of the things that I found out is that if you have the developer console open and then you go into any of the menus in this Gamepad UI feature, whatever, then when you go back to the main menu, you'll have a part of the developer console stuck on the right hand side of the screen. And this happens even in Half-Life 2 and Portal, so if Valve haven't fixed this, then I really don't know what to say how you can go about fixing it. it's probably not fixable without the game UI or engine interface being accessible to us, so don't really know what to say about that. But then, on the Valve Developer Wiki, there's also some sorts of outstanding questions or stuff that hasn't really been proven, so I'm going to go ahead and sort of debunk all of that now, shall we say, or prove it or whatever. So it talks about the options not appearing for 4:3 aspect ratios correctly, but in Source 2013 they do. It's only Portal or Half-Life 2 where the options get clipped on the right hand side. The game, if you have game startup number.mp3 files where number can be 1, 2, 3, 4, blah 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 blah, then it can cause a crash in Half-Life 2 or Portal, but apparently this was fixed for Source 2013, and I can confirm that those sort of game startup sounds don't cause crashes in Source 2013, and you'll probably be hearing some of that here. And also the game soft locking if you don't have a background map when the game loads up. But it's not an issue with Source 2013, as you probably would have seen throughout the entire video, because the entire video had no background maps. But for Half-Life 2 Portal, if there's no background map, then you'd get a soft lock. So that is pretty much everything. The last thing, of course, is that if you use the Gamepad UI, apparently there's supposed to be custom loading stuff, so you get like a logo and like a progress bar that looks different. I'll probably show you what that looks like, but that doesn't seem to work with Source 2013. It just uses the standard game UI loading screen, so don't know how you could go about adding that or fixing that or integrating it into the game or whatever. But yeah, now that's it. I've got nothing else to say. I hope you found this helpful, and of course let me know what you think about this. And as always, take care out there, peace out, see you later. And next video I hoped is going to be a follow-up video about adding the achievements and fixing some stuff. So yeah, have a great day, peace out, see you later.